Coffee and tea is often served from a tray. Whether you are taking the cup of coffee off the tray or the pot of tea off the tray and placing it on the table, or whether you are actually placing the entire tray on the table with the coffee set, sugar, milk, etc., on the actual tray. Trays are a big part of beverage service, and there are a lot of things to talk about when dealing with trays, particularly the confidence issue in dealing with trays. But before we get there, let's start at the beginning by looking at preparing your tray correctly. The first thing when preparing your tray is cleanliness and hygiene. We've got to make sure that the inside of the tray is clean, it's polished. If it's a silver tray like this one, it is polished. We always have to look at the underside of a tray to make sure that that is polished. Remember that when your guests are seated at a table and you are standing above them with the tray, they are going to be looking up. So although the top of the tray might look very polished, you looking down on the tray, it might look clean and hygienic. They're going to be looking underneath the tray. So always make sure when you are preparing your trays back of house that you flip the tray over and give it a nice clean and make sure it's very hygienic. The next thing we must look at is the tray liner. Now, some black trays have rubber liners that are built in, but what we always recommend and what we like to do is to put a tray liner, a white service cloth, on your tray. The reason why we do this is, first of all, a white service cloth looks very clean and looks very neat. You can pick up dirt quite quickly on a tray liner, and you can replace it with a cleaner tray liner. If your tray liner is built in like those rubber textured tray liners, it's very difficult if it gets dirty to replace it. So even if your tray does have a rubber tray liner, try and put a white service cloth inside the tray to make sure that it looks clean and neat at all times. Another reason why we do this is when carrying beverages, they may often spill. The spills can be easily absorbed by this tray liner. Now there are a whole variety of different trays. Whether you have a presentation tray that you're actually going to place on the table in front of a guest, or whether you have a service type tray, whether you're going to remove the drinks from the tray out of your hand, place it on the table, and remove the tray immediately, or a tray with handles, which functions very similar to this tray, except it has two handles. Now, it might look very similar, but the service in this type of tray is actually a lot different. Obviously, if you are carrying a tray with two handles, it's very difficult for you to use your other hand to serve the coffee or tea or put the milk on the table, or clear for that matter. So these type of trays with handles are meant for buddy service, where one person holds the tray and the other person serves from the tray with two free hands, or clears onto the tray with two free hands. We will look at that type of service in great detail. There are a couple of rules when dealing with trays. Once we are confident that our trays are clean, neat, our tray liners are folded correctly with hems facing in, there are a couple of rules we need to look at. Firstly, a tray never, ever, 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 ever goes over a guest's head. Why do we say that? It's obvious. If a tray is over a guest's head and they bump us by mistake, or we trip and fall over by mistake, any contents that is being held by that tray will end up on the guest's head. So if you are holding a hot pot of tea or a scalding cup of coffee, would you want that to land up in a guest's lap, on a guest's forehead? I think you know the answer to that. Rather, instead of getting yourself in that situation, listen to the rule of never allowing your tray to move over a guest's head, or in actual fact, in the vicinity of their head. Because whether you are eating or drinking or having a conversation, a tray in your line of sight is never comfortable if you're a guest. This seems obvious, and you may think it's very easy to obey this rule. But the difficult thing when dealing with trays is that your tray will be on one side and your eyes will be on another side. So you will be watching not the contents of your tray, but where you're going to put it on the table, where you're going to put those items. Or if you are clearing, you'll be watching the items that you're clearing and not your tray. And what happens is you may sway into a guest's out of sight or over their head. So that is the first rule in dealing with trays. Now the second rule in dealing with trays is how to prepare the items that are going to be on your tray. Now remember, you've planned your approach, you've cleared a space on the table for where you're going to place down the items. You've looked at the best way to get to the table. You've made sure that you can get to the table with a tray. Now you need to actually go and place your items on the tray. Now the difficulty when dealing with trays and why so many people are scared of trays is because of balance. Balance says that if I've got a heavy item on this side, on the right side of the tray, I should have a heavy item on the left side of the tray. And therefore it's more balanced. But now what happens if I remove the heavy item from the right side of the tray? The left-hand side of the tray will automatically go down. So we've got to make sure that our technique of carrying trays is correct. And that technique means that our fingers are raised. If our palm is flat, we cannot control the balance. We control the balance by putting pressure evenly on each of our 5 points in our fingers. Now, when this left side is heavier, we put more emphasis on our left side, so our thumb in this case. If the right side is heavier, we put more strength into our last finger that is carrying that tray. So we evenly distribute the balance with where the weight is distributed on the actual tray. Now, when deciding how to position your items on a tray, first thing we got to think about is the weight distribution and the balance of a tray. Now, in this case, if we've got something that is very heavy and very hot, we need to make sure that it is very easily accessible. If you are right-handed, make sure that all of the handles of the items are facing to the right. It makes it much easier to remove from your tray and shows that you are organized and professional. In this case, you can see that the filter coffee is facing right. It is close to the center of the tray, so it is going to be less of a problem in terms of balance. Once it is removed, I can then have access to the milk jug, which is set up in a clockwise direction, because in this case, it is the easiest way for me to serve from the tray. So let's have a look at what order I will serve from this tray. I will first remove the coffee plunger and place it down on the table. The next thing I will remove is the milk jug, and as you can see, because it is facing right, it is easy for me to gain access to it. The next thing that I will remove from the tray is the sugar bowl, again, very easily accessible. And lastly, I will place down the cup. It is light and easy for me to move. Always ask yourself, what is the most dangerous item that would fall on the guest? What would you least like to spill on a guest? And in nearly all cases, it's a hot cup of coffee or a hot pot of tea. So remember, planning leads to professional service. And if you don't have confidence in dealing with trays, the only way that you are going to get confident is practice your technique and practice over and over and over.
Let's have another look at trays. The way in which you prepare your tray is vitally important. The first task is to ensure the cleanliness and hygiene of your tray. You need to ensure that the top and bottom of the tray is perfectly clean and polished, as the guest is likely to see both the bottom and the top of the tray while you are using it. Use a clean, neatly folded, white service cloth or tray liner on all of your trays. This will help to prolong the life of the tray, as well as helping you to soak up anything that might spill out of a cup while carrying. There are 3 different types of trays. Firstly, a display tray. Secondly, a service tray. And thirdly, a large tray with handles. Let's look at each of these. A display tray is where beverages and accompaniments are presented on the tray and placed in front of guests. A service tray is what we use to carry beverages to and from where they are being made and then placed onto the table. Thirdly, the large tray with handles is used for the buddy system, to deliver your beverages to large tables of guests, and it's also used for clearing large tables. Let's look at some of the golden rules of tray service. A golden rule is to never hold trays over the head of the guest, or to be too close in proximity to the guest, since they might knock it over and get hurt or get spilled on. Another great hint: for perfect balance and weight distribution, always place the heaviest items in the center of the tray. Holding the tray with a raised palm, using all 5 fingers to balance the tray. When placing items down on your tray, your setup should be logical, and it should have all the handles of the items in the same place, so that you can reach them easily while serving. If you are right-handed, keep the handles pointing to the right. If you are left-handed, keep the handles pointing to the left. Another golden rule is to never place a tray on a table in front of a guest. This should never happen. Always place it on a service table, or make sure you use a buddy system. When serving from a tray, remove the heaviest items from the tray first, and work your way clockwise, placing the lightest item down on the table last. Remember all of the key steps of fine service when delivering from a tray. Placing in the correct place and making sure that it is as easy as possible for your guest to access what you have placed down, with all the handles facing the right way and the same way every time. Good luck at great service from a tray.